Hello, I'm Jeremy Vine, and this is Panorama. Lord Ashcroft is the man who helped fund the Conservative Party into power.
He's one of the most important unelected figures in the Conservative Party.
He's provided them with money like nobody else has.
I, Michael, Lord Ashcroft.
But where does his money come from?
There will be no more suffering of this one man's campaign to subjugate an entire nation to his will.
Why is he accused of concealing business interests?
I'm in disbelief. I mean, he was clearly a partner in the project.
And why are British detectives looking into 2 loans made by one of his banks?
Why was Belize Bank giving millions of dollars to our political leaders?
All the main parties have faced controversy over their funding. Labour's reliance on the unions is under increased scrutiny following the election of its new leader. But few individual donors have been as controversial as Lord Ashcroft. His time as the Conservatives' deputy chairman was dogged by financial issues. Over the last 12 months, Panorama has been investigating his businesses in the 2 other countries Lord Ashcroft calls home. And tonight, we look into accusations of secret deals, hidden interests, and tax avoidance. Richard Bilton reports.
David Cameron enters Downing Street as Prime Minister, the first Conservative leader to do so in 13 years. And one man more than any other helped pay for this, Lord Michael Ashcroft.
Lord Ashcroft helped save the Conservative Party financially at the end of the 1990s and the beginning of the 2000s. He's also been very, very important on the political front because his research helped convince a lot of people that the Conservative Party really did need to change fundamentally, and it was that set the context for David Cameron's election as leader.
Lord Ashcroft, who resigned as deputy chairman of the Conservative Party 2 weeks ago, is the biggest political donor since records began in 2001. He says he's given well in excess of £10 million to the Tories, and he's credited with running the campaign from Conservative Central Office to win the marginals at the last election.
He clearly was totally central to the election effort. He concentrated on these marginal seats. There's no doubt he put a lot of money into it, and those people who received the money were very grateful.
So where did the money come from that went to the Conservative Party?
Lord Ashcroft is an international financier and entrepreneur. We asked him to take part in this programme, but he declined. So what do we know about him? Well, his business dealings are very secretive. He's rich and he's made a lot of his money in tax havens.
I don't think the Conservative Party takes a view on the business empires of the people that donate to it. I think that the Conservative Party assumes that the people who donate to it and tries to take steps to ensure that the people who donate to it and lend to it, are successful businessmen, going about their business in a completely above the board way.
In 2000, he was made a peer, nominated by William Hague, the then Tory leader.
I, Michael, Lord Ashcroft, do swear by Almighty.
Part of the deal was Lord Ashcroft would cease to be a tax exile. He'd come back to the UK and start paying tax on his worldwide income. William Hague told Tony Blair in a letter that it would benefit the Treasury tens of millions of pounds a year.
But 9 years after the peerage, William Hague didn't seem sure whether Lord Ashcroft was paying that tax.
The obligations that were imposed on him at the time that he became
but does he pay taxes in the UK?
Well, I imagine that was the obligation that was imposed on him.
So you think he does?
So I think he's fulfilled what was asked of him.
I don't understand
Well, you
that.
can't expect me to know every
phrase.
detail of somebody's tax affairs, but I have asked him, and he has...
But you must have asked him as a yes or no, then, surely.
I've asked him, and he fulfills the obligations that were imposed on him.
Well, in the run-up to this year's election, Lord Ashcroft finally revealed the truth, that despite promising to become a permanent resident, he hadn't. Officials agreed that Lord Ashcroft could become a long-term resident instead, which meant he didn't have to pay tax on his income from abroad. he never had to pay the tens of millions which William Hague had promised.
Lord Ashcroft gave the public the impression he was doing one thing, but did the opposite. An allegation we've discovered has repeatedly been made about him.
Take this speech in the House of Lords.
We should dump restrictive regulations and replace them with requirements only of openness and transparency.
Lord Ashcroft was calling for greater openness in the way political donations are made. But the way his recent donations got to the Conservative Party is far from transparent. They didn't come direct, but went through a series of companies. The Electoral Commission spent 17 months examining this arrangement. Though they decided the donations were legal because they'd been given by a UK company, they couldn't work out exactly where the money had originally come from. But they were able to trace some of the funds as far as Belize, a Central American country 5,000 miles from Tory HQ. Another place where there are questions about the transparency of his business dealings and whether he pays his fair share of tax.
Well, this feels a long way from the UK, and it feels a long way from Westminster. We're on the Belize River, heading into the country's main town. But this place actually is right at the heart of the Lord Ashcroft story, because in this town is the headquarters of his business.
This is an extremely poor country, but Lord Ashcroft has still managed to make a lot of money here. He owns the country's biggest bank, Belize Bank, but he's not too popular with the nation's Prime Minister.
This is our house. This is our country. Here we are masters. Here we are sovereign. And there will be no more suffering of this one man's campaign to subjugate an entire nation to his will.
Now, Lord Ashcroft says this attack is baseless, but what prompted the Prime Minister's extraordinary outburst? Well, in Belize, Lord Ashcroft's been accused of tax avoidance and benefiting from secret deals. One of Lord Ashcroft's business rivals has been Glenn Godfrey.
His personal worth is greater than the GDP of Belize. And if you have somebody with that amount of wealth, that's a very influential person in a small economy like this.
Lord Ashcroft became a Belizean citizen about 20 years ago, and as in the UK, he got involved in politics. Only here, it wasn't just one side. He's given money to both of the main political parties. In 1989, he made a major donation to the party that went on to win the election. A year later, he struck an unusual deal. He suggested a new law. It was passed, and it gave his main company, which owns the bank, a 30-year exemption on most taxes. Glenn Godfrey was Attorney General at the time. He says he had objections, but was persuaded to back the deal.
They thought it was good for the country, and that Mr. Ashcroft had been very helpful. He got away with, I won't say murder, but he got away with a lot of tax advantages.
But it's not the tax deal that's upset the Prime Minister. He's making a much more serious accusation. That Lord Ashcroft secretly controlled the country's phone company, Telemedia, and benefited from what the Prime Minister calls a morally repugnant deal with the previous government. A deal which saw Belizean taxpayers guarantee the company substantial profits.
That an agreement so patently illegal, so patently immoral, so patently anti-Belize.
Telemedia was guaranteed not less than 15%, as Lord Ashcroft himself kept pointing out to me. This is a minimum. If he didn't make, or if Telemedia didn't make that minimum 15% rate of return, then the taxpayers would have to make up the shortfall.
Although Lord Ashcroft was involved in an advisory capacity,